Hello, this is American College Dream, and today we have our speaker Charles, and we're going to talk about the American engineer or engineer life in America. So, Charles, would you like to introduce a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Happy to be here. My name is Charles. I've been working as in software engineering at NVIDIA in America for about 4 or 5 years now.
Mhm. Well, thank you for coming to the show. So our show, the main audience is, just trying to help the young people to get into the college and after college to go to the right career path, or the career paths that they have a lot of energy and passion for. So today we mainly will be talking about engineering, and then in particular talking more about software engineering than others aspect. So we're gonna start with so what make an engineer? What's an engineer's work in today's American society? Just give a kind of a broad definition of it can be it can be more than software engineer. Just what does engineer do?
I think, in my opinion, the job of engineering is about exploring different ideas to get leveraging math and science to explore different ideas to do things. For example, in software engineering, it's about exploring different computational ideas to do things that perhaps no one had tried before, which including crazy things like artificial intelligence or self-driving cars. Those are the examples I'm most familiar with, at least.
Sure. I mean that actually also resonate with myself, because I'm more of a math and physics background. So what you say is very agreeable with me. I mean, there's definitely more than that, in the chemistry or biology and other aspect of science. So, what so what do you think about today's engineering that make it rewarding for yourself? Why is engineering make it rewarding for yourself? What do you think?
I think engineering, it's all about finding new challenges and trying things that perhaps no one has tried before, and just playing around and experimenting and seeing results and trying to improve things. It's always about that drive to do things a little bit better, and always kind of questioning the established things, like, well, just because it's always been done this way doesn't mean it'll always continue to be this way. So that makes it really fun to kind of just challenge established ideas sometimes.
So it's kind of like making today's you better than yesterday's you, and just try to discover what's within you and how do you using what's within you to make a changes to the society.
Yeah, it's both about your self-discovery, about discovering more ability that you yourself might have, but also discovering the things in the world, properties in the natural world that you can leverage to do computation or to do certain processes better.
Mhm. So I mean, we hear a lot about AI nowadays, right? So this question will probably be somewhat interesting to a lot of young people and any people. So AI has been becoming kind of impactful and kind of like a reality in many different ways. What is your understanding of AI in today's engineering works, and has it been impacting your engineering work too, in where you work? What do you think?
I think the primary, so up till this point, the primary role of artificial intelligence is using artificial intelligence to solve problems in the real world. These could be things like searching for things, translate things, just automate kind of easy things to do, and making them faster. Recently, there's been trends where the chatbot, where you see things like the chatbot AI or the OpenGPT, all these new artificial networks that are being very, very impressive, that demonstrate a lot of capability. I think perhaps there's a chance that that will become more involved, more leveraged in the everyday work, through the work life of engineer. Perhaps asking for code reviews or asking the OpenGPT to generate some template code to kind of as a starting point. So there's potential for AI to be more and more involved in engineers' work in the future. But so far today, it's more about applying AI to outside the engineers' day-to-day work, at least.
Mm. Well, to myself, I feel like AI has been around for a long time. It's just that we don't call it AI when we were using it. It was kind of like like data mining. We do a lot of data mining when I was engineer 20, 30 years ago, and we would get those data, using those data, and do the statistics on those data, and then try to make a judgment, based on those data. It's kind of what AI is about, basing on the big data, and then processing the data, and then and then make the decision. But the decision maybe it's made by engineer, but nowadays the decision is made by the AI. Probably some of it is moving toward the AI would then make the decision for you. But I was surprised how AI has become so widespread, or becoming more widespread. So certainly it's opening my eyes. When I was using the what's that called, the
Chatbot.
chat box. Yeah, when I was asking for like where is the open source firmware for the drones. The say for example the flight controller F7 speedy eyes, and it was able to find it. The exact location, and that certainly was quite impressive.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick detour of that. AI has kind of progressed since 20, 30 years ago. Back then, it was more of a statistical driven model of just trying to find like what is the most correlation. And now the trend is more about neural networks, and it's less about statistics and more about using what's called a gradient descent algorithm to optimize this neural network. It's a little bit difficult to explain, difficult to understand, but it's less of a statistical model these days.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'm coming from my own background. I may be mistaken what AI is nowadays to thinking what I was working on was also AI, but in reality, the AI is probably a developing process, and now the AI is probably more like what you were saying, which a little beyond me in a sense.
Yeah.
I don't want to pretend that I know it, right?
It's just more evidence for how quickly the field changes. Like even within 20, 30 years, that you can have radical shifts within engineering fields.
So let's just kind of, like move away from what we're talking about AI. So as an engineer, sometimes you probably get a little frustrated, maybe a little kind of lower energy, or how do you refresh yourself? Like as an engineer, it's pretty stressful. It can be stressful, I guess. So how do you refresh yourself?
I think so there are two things. One, you want to try to avoid getting into situations where you are low energy, where you have less, your body is going to have less capability. And that just means it's very important to take care of your well-being, in terms of your physical health. Make sure that you get enough exercise, you get enough sleep, you don't skip on food, water. So that's the first thing you'd like. That's probably the most basic thing and most important thing to just have good habits so that these things happen less and less frequently.
Yeah, that's kind of common sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's common sense, but for many people who are stressed out, one of the things that can very easily people cut out, be like, well, if I skip food, I will have another hour to work on things. So just a reminder that it's usually not worth skipping food just to get another hour of work.
So what stress is kind of external? For example, your manager is being ridiculous about the deadline, it's like, so where is the results? What if the stress is coming from the top or coming from the external? How do you handle that?
It's a good question. Yeah. Sometimes, usually, the first thing you want to do is you would want to discuss with your manager to indicate that they are stressed. After managers are people and they're supposed to look out for your well-being too, because if you can't work effectively, then the whole team is being slowed down effectively. So the first thing is to discuss with your manager and make sure that you let them know what your situation is, and perhaps sometimes, not always, but sometimes they can like help you out. They can shift some of your workload to someone else. They can get you help from someone else to get you more resources. So that's the first thing to do. The other thing is, you always want to reach out to your friends and family. Make sure you do not neglect those relationships. having friends and complain about work together is a very helpful experience from my times. Other than
So
that, it's just about making sure you keep up with your hobbies and
yeah,
taking
so I
breaks from
guess
work as
I
well.
agree with you. We need to communicate, what we're facing, so maybe sometimes the task is really not your strength, and then you may need some other people's support to get out of that hurdle. And so we need to kind of communicate that clearly so that management understand that you are, under that kind of stress is actually you actually need other teammates help or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So 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 let's say let's talk about like a life and work balance, right? So besides work, in Silicon Valley, or San Francisco, what does people do? Like when do they have hobby, like stuff like that? What do you do? I mean, you can't just be working all day long, writing code all day long, right?
Yeah, exactly. I do a lot of rock climbing, and it is actually a fairly common hobby in this area to find software engineers or other engineers rock climbing at your local rock climbing gym.
Mm-hmm.
There's the usual suspects, doing good exercise, running, swimming. Frisbee is another common hobby here. And other than that, there's always a chance to escape San Francisco or the Bay Area, go out. Skiing is another hobby that I try to take advantage of when I have the opportunity. That requires a little bit more work because you have to go into the mountains and book lodgings, but it's definitely rewarding to do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I mean, exercise is definitely one way, and the other things can be is, maybe read some books and maybe go hiking and stuff like that, right? Go to nature so
It's
you can
true.
kind of release your tension.
Get
Um,
some cooking in, baking is helpful as well.
yeah, cooking, baking, and talking. And so, what do you think about so AI is definitely play a big role in driverless car, and so do you believe that driverless car it can be a reality in 5 to 10 years, or 3 to 5 years? Well, what's your take on that?
I think it's definitely a very high possibility. I myself have ridden in a driverless car within San Francisco, so I can tell you that it's definitely on the edge of possible. Like technically, it's more and more possible with every day. There's some hurdles, of course. I think right now one of the hurdles is just from a legal perspective and a political perspective. Um, driverless car. Motorized vehicles without drivers is a pretty new concept within the legal framework, and trying to figure out things like who is responsible for the car when the car has no driver in it, and are these cars allowed? Are there restrictions on how often or where they can go? There are a lot of these legal challenges that remain, that is potentially as difficult as the technical challenges.
Mhm. So were you nervous or were you excited? When you were riding this driverless car, how do you feel? How did you feel?
Let's see. I was a little bit nervous and just very interested. It was my friend works at the driverless car company, so it was not her first time in the driverless car,
Mhm.
and that did a lot to help soothe my anxiety throughout the experience. So I was probably more interested, intrigued, and nervous the whole time.
So it's kind of you trust her that she
Exactly.
will not kill you. So then let's go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she survived several drives already, so surely I'll survive her next one.
So just give us a ballpark number, like within your friends, that your company's coworker. Let's say 10 people. In 10 people, how many people have done this kind of driverless car experience in your opinion?
I think it'll probably still be very small, maybe one or two in 10 at
One or
most.
two.
Not more than two, I would say.
Mhm. Okay. So so I mean, government is also playing a role in today's technology. Like so right now, government is doing like supporting the AI, and then doing the charging for the for the electric car, and then doing the semiconductor. So what do you think the American government has been doing? Are they hurting you guys? Are they like helping you guys? Are they making your life more difficult? What do you think? What have they done so far?
That's a pretty tough question. I would say it definitely depends on where you'll stand politically. And I'll say the safe answers is that one thing the American government does do is that it funds higher education, which funds research into a lot of these lot of these pure science fields, which have no immediate applications today, but perhaps 50 years down the road, they will yield some sort of application that will be helpful. You can look at things like the internet, or which came out of a DARPA initiative that has been hugely transformative. I remember that someone mentioned that the latest fabrication technologies, a lot of that was developed in America in conjunction with American government research. And so, of course, silicon fabrication, very, very impactful things. So that's definitely an area where they do good work, is by spending money to fund public research into pure science and engineering. That's very good investment, in my opinion.
So along the same line of thoughts, are there some industry that you would personally like to see that it happen, which has not become, like mature yet today, but you were hoping that this kind of emerging technology one day would actually, become available for humankind and for yourself? Are there this kind of technology that you're thinking about, when you have nothing to do? I mean, obviously you always have something to do, but when you are,
Yeah.
have a little spare time.
I think from just a purely scientific perspective, I would enjoy to see quantum computing make a resurgence. Just because I have a background in physics, and there's a lot of cool physics effects that are leveraged in quantum computations. So from just a purely selfish, like I like to see the science happen. I like to see that field emerge.
Sure. How about like fusion energy? Does that appeal to you?
Fusion energy, yeah, that actually has more, I would say, impactful benefits, since it will help us with the energy crisis and climate change. And as you probably know, there has been a recent announcement where, for the first time, they got more energy out of fusion reaction than what was given into the system. So that is also hugely exciting.
So you mentioned quantum computing. So quantum computing. Who are the major players nowadays in quantum computing in America? If you know, you can share with us.
I think I've heard two. I think there's three big players right now. I only remember two of them off the top of my head, which is, I
Google
think,
probably
Google.
It's playing a role, right?
Google does a big one, and I think Microsoft is doing another big one. And last I heard, Microsoft is doing a slightly different approach than Google, and it's kind of where essentially Microsoft trying to do a harder version of quantum computing. They're using more difficult quantum physical phenomenon to do the computation, with the benefit of, like, yes, this is harder and less well understood, but it is more stable process, and Google's process is a little bit, it's more well understood, and potentially it's more mature technology, but fundamentally it's a little bit less stable. So it will be really fun to see whose bets win, whether Microsoft's kind of bet that this less understood process will work, or Google's more like tried and true process will work.
From what I learned and heard, I heard NVIDIA is also involved in terms of, like providing the chips, right? So that they can do the quantum computing. I wouldn't be too surprised they are also contributing in that end. What do you think?
First of all, I should make the comment that I'm here just on my own. I do not represent my company, so
Sure.
let that be known. Second of all, I don't really follow what NVIDIA has been doing on the quantum computing side. I would not be surprised, but I have not been following.
Sure. Yeah. So since we have a lot of young people in our audience, and maybe their parents too, would you recommend the young people to get into the software engineering industry? Personally, I'm not too excited with coding. Okay, so I'm always I feel more toward the physics and science, but I'm a little less excited by the software engineering. But what do you think? Would you recommend the young people to get into the software engineering? And if you recommend, why is it you recommending them to get into it?
Well, I'll just recommend that for the young people that they follow engineering that they're excited about. So, for example, if code doesn't really speak to you, then try something other than code. So I would just say follow which parts of engineering is most you find more fun, because if you have fun with your career, that's going to be in the long run worth a lot more than just kind of going day to day working at a job that you may or may not enjoy. So yeah, that'll be my advice. Just try to find which field engineering. It could be electrical, it could be mechanical, could be software, but there are many engineering fields, and you don't have to end up working software if that's something that doesn't truly speak to you.
Mm-hmm. So do you think you will continue as a software engineer like 10 years from today?
I think most likely, yes. I think I'm having quite a bit of fun here. So I probably will be in 10 years.
You think so, huh? So software sounds like you got into the right industry for yourself.
Yeah, I found the fun work sector that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about the, like an updated skill, like keep yourself, refreshing, do you take a proactive role, or do you take a more of a reactive role? How do you prepare yourself for tomorrow's technology? Like what do you do? Because the technology is changing so rapidly. As an engineer, how do you handle that? How does your coworker handle that?
Yeah, it's actually something we have discussed within our coworkers, trying like how do you keep up with all the changing technology? For example, within software engineering, what things that would change would be, example, different kind of libraries that you're expected to know and use to develop new capabilities, new features. So it's very challenging for a lot of us to try to keep up to date with all the different libraries, all the different types of software that you have to be familiar with. I think ideally you do take a more proactive role in kind of trying out different new softwares as they come out and playing with them and seeing their capabilities. Unfortunately, I take more of a reactive role, where it's just kind of when we hear about things, sometimes if you have time, we'll try it out a little bit, but more often than not, it's when someone recommends us to try a new software that we kind of really invest to get and really try out and see how it goes. So ideally,
I guess when the changes is happen so rapidly, even though you want to be proactive, sometimes because they happen so quickly, and then all of a sudden you find yourself to be in reactive mode, right?
Yeah, and because there's so many changes, sometimes it's hard to know which new software is worth looking at and which ones you can just ignore.
Yeah. So, what kind of languages is your favorite? And why? Why? Is it fair to say that you actually can pick a language that you favor, or you actually have no choice but to follow what the company telling you?
It'll definitely depend on company, but I think at a certain point, there will be certain requirements in terms of like we need a language that does X, A, B, and C, and usually that will mean that only a few select languages will do the job, and it becomes less about what your preference is and just more about what are the capabilities each language unlocks. Personally, I prefer Python because that is a very straightforward and easy to understand language. But it's not a very performative language, so you can already see some of these trade-offs happening in real time.
So within the software engineer, what are the steps that you see from the beginning and then to the mid of the career and then toward the end? How do you progress as in the role of software engineer? What do you see? What do you see like 5 years from today? What would you be doing? That kind of thing, like the progression.
I think for the software engineering career progression ladder, it just becomes, or one way you can look at it is you become less and less reactive and more proactive. So it becomes less and less of being told what to do and more of you telling other people, here are the features, here are the things we need, and kind of taking a leadership role in your career. So over time, as you when you start out, you're perhaps less confident in your abilities and you're less aware of how the field looks and some of the common pitfalls. But over time, as you work on more things, you gain more experience, you become more confident, and then then it becomes more of a you start advocating for certain changes, for certain things that should be done, and negotiating with management to kind of fit those into the roadmap. And then eventually, well, I'm not quite there yet, but I imagine further down the line, it's becomes less of you're being asked to do things and more of you asking other things to do things on your behalf.
So in your software engineering type of work, is time critical important for when you do the coding, like, the efficient in computing, time critical? What's your experience? Have you done time critical type of coding?
We have done certain codes where it's very critical that it completes very quickly, if that's what you mean. But for the most part,
I say, well, people want to do some searches, right? They certainly want the search to come back as quick as possible, right? So in that case, it would be time critical.
I see. We definitely want to, well, as an engineer, you're always trying to improve things. So you always want to like make it as quick as possible. It becomes a question of like how quick is quick enough. And sometimes if your search completes in 1 second versus 5 milliseconds, to the human eye, perhaps it's good enough. That's 1 second versus 5 milliseconds. Perhaps sometimes if you're working on like computer graphics, you're working on games, you're trying to, it is much more time critical. So it definitely depends on what you're working on and how it engages with the user.
So I guess time, we always want it to be done, in a shorter time. But I guess we do have to kind of pay attention to different trade-off. How much memory do you have? How much you want to spend on the cost, and what algorithm is doable for this kind of machine, this hardware that you're using, and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's engineering in a nutshell. Always trying to balance the different trade-offs.
So we have a few minutes left. How about teamwork? Is teamwork important in your view, in today's Americans, engineers society? What do you think? Has it been an important part of you as an engineer?
I would say it's a very important part, especially within software engineering. The trend within this industry is that the code is being broken up into more and more different pieces. So more and more likely that if you have a new feature comes in, it's less these days. Perhaps in the olden days, it used to be just one team would work on that feature and deliver it. Nowadays, it's more like if there's a feature, many teams have to work on it together to make sure that all their small pieces work together with each other, and then it can be delivered. So teamwork is becoming more and more of a critical component. And you'll likely see this in many other places as well, or many other engineering fields where different teams take on different responsibilities. And when there's a feature, it often will be impacted multiple teams and they have to work together. I know in hardware, in chip design, that with the idea of chiplets, that's another example of kind of breaking down one big chip into smaller chips so that different teams have to work together to get one feature done. And it's another thing for career growth, because eventually you want to become more of a leadership position, and that means leading a team. So it's helpful when you're leading a team that your teammates trust you. So teamwork is very, very important there as well.
Sure.
So if you don't have teamwork, it will definitely stifle your career growth.
Yeah. So at least you are aware of it, and what it can do to your work. In general, the quality will be better if you're aware of what other people are doing, and also in terms of your career growth, right? So so we're talking about the teamwork, right? So how about if the management, the management role, does it ever appeal to you or to become an engineering manager rather than to be an engineering contributor, individual contributor? What's your take on that?
I don't think it appeals to me yet. I think it's still a little early for me to tell. I can see appeal on both sides, to be honest. I can see appeal as to be just kind of an individual contributor as an engineer and kind of taking the lead as management. But management requires a certain amount of people skills and dealing with people more often than engineering. So that's potentially one downside of becoming a manager for me.
Yeah. So you feel like if you become manager, maybe you're losing your technical skill, which you kind of like you don't want to give up. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In your opinion, when you are working together in a team, and are they physically separated, or are they like using Zoom, using all this remote tool, or are they you guys actually still kind of working more of a like a face to face and working like a personal level? What has been the experience for you?
That would highly depend on the company and team. Within our team, it's a little more remote. Everyone is more working from home model for now. Um, so I have heard of other companies requiring people to come in a few times a week so that you get that face-to-face interaction.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a mix.
Yeah. So my last, almost the last question is, so pandemic has been going on for 3 years, right? Has it been impacting your life as an engineer? Has it been impacting your company's engineers' life? How has it been?
I think it definitely has impacted our engineering day-to-day life because when you're in the office, if you just want to talk to someone, it's pretty straightforward. You can kind of just show up at their desk and start chatting, especially if they're within your team. But now that everyone's remote, a casual chat becomes more of a calendar invite. So you have to make sure that that their schedule is free and that they're not on their lunch break, especially if they're in different time zones. So it puts a little bit more of a hurdle in kind of getting that human-to-human interaction. And then at some places, some people are less open to turning on their cameras, and then which really kind of dehumanizes the collaborative effort. And that sometimes that feels a little bit sad.
So we'll give the last question back to you. So what would you recommend to the young people or the young people's parents or any engineer that's out there, in today's American society? What would you recommend if they wanted to become engineer or if they want to study STEM in college? What are your recommendation? Being an engineer for about 4 or 5 years now in a very tough company.
I would just recommend that they have fun with it. It's not you're not doing this for a few years, you're doing this for a career. So it's many years. So definitely find fields and coursework that you find appealing, find interesting, and play around with and follow that passion. So yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you for joining our American College Dream program, and it's been a pleasure to talking with you. And so that's the end of our program.
Likewise.